we'll be developing technology to give them, through a combination of developing and licensing technology, that will a tech stack that enables them to sort of get a basic footprint initially of what their exposure is. So EthicStream is a really full service sort of one-stop shop for sustainability professionals, frankly, for companies to meet and address their sustainability needs, specifically with respect to emissions.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Josh Soloway. He's the CEO of EthicStream. Josh, welcome to the show.
Right, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. So, Josh, tell me a little bit about yourself.
My background is generally in entrepreneurship, but by training, I'm an attorney and investment banker. I've worked in a variety of industries, from technology to real estate to climate tech, basically.
Yeah, so that brings you here to EthicStream. So talk to me a little bit about EthicStream.
So EthicStream is a really full service sort of one-stop shop for sustainability professionals, frankly, for companies to meet and address their sustainability needs, specifically with respect to emissions. So every company has emissions, every company is an emitter, every person is an emitter of carbon. And so there's increasing pressure, as you've probably seen in the news and read about. There's increasing pressure on really all companies and executives to achieve sort of carbon neutrality. You may hear, is it net zero, carbon neutral, et cetera. But it's really about balancing your emissions, because at the end of the day, there are only two ways to get to net zero, right? You either cut your emissions or you buy carbon offsets. Carbon offsets have become pretty controversial, particularly in recent weeks even. But at the end of the day, unless everybody wants to go back to, just walking, not even just talking about riding bikes. Bikes have to get produced. Production from and it generates carbon. Getting the bike to the bike shop creates carbon. Driving to the bike shop generates carbon. So all of this, it's highly unlikely that we're going to slash our way to zero carbon emissions. And for any business to get to a net zero, they would have to shrink their business into essentially non-existence. So forget it. Not even just, they would have to forget about growth, because there's no growth. They would have to, and that's just to stay even. But to cut to net zero would require cutting all emissions, which basically would be really impossible. Now, that being said, there are obviously technologies being developed all over the place, which we're very supportive of, which are part of the solution to cut emissions, and in various businesses, in industries, in every industry, people are focused on that to some extent, in some fashion. So but the other piece is buying offsets. So it's really a combination, right? Try and cut as much as you can while still, growing your business and expanding your business, right? Your business, and buy offsets. So that's where EthicStream really comes in. So we are working with companies to figure out what their exposure is, help them to develop and implement a plan to address their emissions exposure and to achieve their emissions goals in terms of balancing, and actually sourcing those carbon offsets for them, the carbon credits. There's a nuance between carbon credits and offsets that I won't bore you with right now, but essentially that's what we're talking about. And we are able to provide, and this speaks to the controversy around carbon offsets, particularly forest-based, nature-based offsets, which there was a European Commission report in 2016 that said 85% of forest projects won't live up to their claims in terms of carbon sequestration, carbon capture. And then there was an article in The Guardian just the last couple of weeks about which really took a hard shot at the whole carbon offsetting industry, saying, that these credits are bogus, that it's not really, it's not additive to the problem. It doesn't really remove carbon that wouldn't have been removed anyway. That's a whole other concept I can get into later. But the bottom line is we have a relationship with a company called Carbon Ethic, which is developing one of the largest forest-based carbon offset projects in the world at about 4.2 million hectares, so roughly the size of Switzerland. Yeah. And it's in British Columbia, Canada. So they are not only developing the largest project, but developing a project that is in partnership with indigenous groups there that have really been disenfranchised forever, and splitting the economics with them. 51% goes to the indigenous, 19% goes back into the land at the care for the forest and improve the health of the forest, and then the extra 30% obviously goes to the company itself. But what they're also doing is developing what could be regarded as the most technologically advanced forestry company in the world. So developing technologies to address the issues of transparency, verification, actually what happened, what carbon actually got pulled out of the atmosphere and sequestered. We say sequestered, and that's been the big issue, is measurement, transparency. There are ways to cheat. A lot of project developers do that, some innocently, relatively, and some, nefariously, surely. But Carbon Ethic has been on a real mission to address that issue through technology. So they've raised about $6 million to date, and have deployed that to advance the project, their initial project, develop technology to better monitor and improve the health of forests and just generate better credits. And then also another company, Carbotanics, under Carbon Ethic, is focused on digitizing those credits so that they're on blockchain. So there's this immutable ledger and all that. Anyway, that's what they're doing. What that means for EthicStream is we have an arrangement that where we've entered into an LOI, and we'll be moving to material agreements here shortly. And that is that arrangement enables us to buy 10% of their production at a significant discounts of up to 30%. So we lock in a premium, which is great for our investors and for our business and for our clients, because we can then provide attractively priced top tier quality credits that they can actually trust. So when you're a sustainability officer at a company, well, let me just talk about that for a minute. We think that's a really challenging position to be in. You look at the sustainability officer and you say, wow, okay, some people might think, oh, okay, cushy gig. But it's actually really challenging, because a lot of these people, they're not trained in all things carbon, and they're now being told, well, you're responsible for getting us to net zero. And now here's your budget. They say, well, everything I'm reading says this stuff is pretty unreliable. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to turn left and buy wrong credits. I don't want to turn right and not buy credits because I have to do my job. So it's actually really difficult. So we're really trying to be a resource to those folks, where they can build really solid practical plans, and then they can actually access trustworthy, verifiable credits. And with the tech that between the tech we're developing and the tech we're licensing from Carbon Ethic, they can stand there with a dashboard and say, here's exactly what I bought. Here's how much carbon was sequestered. Here are the trees. Here's the whole, and they can really, show their investors, their board members, their CEOs, their clients that this is what they did and this is their commitment to sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can you help businesses, like, talk to me the ways that you're able to, advise and, help them choose and secure these carbon credits?
Well, the first piece is, getting a handle on their exposure, right? So we'll be developing technology to give them, through a combination of developing and licensing
Hmm.
technology, that will tech stack that enables them to sort of get a basic footprint initially of what their exposure is. That's the
Hmm.
first.
Hmm.
Then we have a team of consultants and advisors um, that are really industry leaders in the space. They're doing it a long time. Our chief sustainability officer, Jacques Prescott, has been in the sustainability industry uh, since I was very, very little. He's been around it for a long time. And he has really brought to bear some incredible talent. From Riccardo Valentini, who's he was the lead author on the IPCC's report that won the 2007 Nobel Prize on climate for its work on climate change. He's brought in Claude Villeneuve, who helped to write the carbon credit qualification standards, the ISO standards for Canada. So we have real experts, to bring in to help advise, to qualify that, yes, this is a viable project that you're getting these credits from. B, yeah, it really meets the specs, et cetera. And then we have a host of other, you know, uh, people that we're bringing in to advise on sort of how to implement, what the plan should look like and how to implement it, and then how to actually source those credits, which again, we're able to source directly from our partner. Now, in some instances, of course, uh, those won't be the right credits for a particular client. They may have a project in Malaysia and they want to source, or there are reasons for this, but may want to source their credit from Asia or from that region project over there. So we have relationships in the industry, and those are always evolving and expanding. And we over time will be providing similar forms of the financing. Really, what we provide to Carbon Ethic is a form of financing. Right? We get the discount because we pay them a portion in advance.
Hmm.
So we pre-purchase a portion of their credits, and then they get money to fund their project. It's not dilutive equity. It's not debt. So it's a nice, efficient capital source for them to fund their project. We'll be doing the same with partners in other regions.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the trouble and the problems that your clients have before they start working with EthicStream and Carbon Ethic.
Well, I mean, currently it's really evolving. Currently, it's mostly, at least in the U.S., it's voluntary, right? People aren't mandated per se to balance their emissions, not legally. In Canada, it's a carbon tax.
Yeah.
Right. So, and other jurisdictions around the world are rolling out a carbon tax. The SEC here in the U.S., the SEC has proposed just disclosure requirements for any public company, certainly, to be required to disclose their emissions in the same fashion they would disclose their financials. And that certainly seems to be in place to be setting the stage for a situation where all these companies will have to disclose their emissions. Now, that's unlikely to be, hey, good job, you disclosed your emissions. That'll be all. I don't think that's where this is headed, right? I mean, that's not the idea. Surely it's headed to, and now what are you doing about it? Right? Now you're going to be, it's a perfect set up to roll out carbon taxes, or at the very least for institutions such as BlackRock. Larry Fink has been pushing for sustainability requirements as a gateway, as a threshold that has to be met before investment goes into any of these companies. They're largest asset managers, so you have to pay attention when he says that.
Yeah.
So that's a problem that is coming their way. Any public company, and then you have other companies that maybe not public, but they're selling into a supply chain, right? And their largest partners or clients or even vendors are requiring that they demonstrate their sustainability, right? And that what their carbon footprint looks like and how they're addressing it. And so it's increasingly becoming a problem for companies, even companies you wouldn't think of, right? Because a lot of people say, well, okay, all right, I'm not public. What do I care if the SEC requires disclosure for public companies? It doesn't matter to me. Well, if you're selling into a supply chain that, where that's required, or to big companies that are under the microscope, then it is an issue. And forget, don't get too technical with scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, but the further you get down the chain, the more companies and people are affected.
So, like you said, it's not mandated yet. So, talk to me a little bit about how EthicStream is able to differentiate itself from its competition in this kind of growing field.
Yeah, we looked at some streaming companies out in the market, and look, we say competitors, this is a problem that requires a lot of solutions and sort of all options on the table, right? It's a big problem for everybody who wants to live on this planet. So, which, probably is everybody. Barring a few folks who are very enamored of going to Mars. I like it. But not saying a backup plan is not a good thing to have, but I'm just pretty good about a life here. But I think it requires all solutions. So there are companies coming out to be sort of streaming companies. So what that means is, again, as I said before, if I'm a streaming company, you're a project developer, you have a project that's going to generate some carbon credits, and I'm going to come to you and say, okay, that looks like a good project. I'll buy X% of your production. I'll get you, Y% out front, and you'll take that and use that to develop your project. I get the credits at a discount for a certain period of time, or maybe the whole life of the project. And it's like a win-win, right? Because I get the projects the credits at a discount, you get to advance your project. Good deal. What we found looking at some of the streaming companies that were out there is, well, they were coming to the market raising a lot of money from investors, but they didn't have a project. It was really an idea, purely. And so, and surely some experienced execs and all that, and you could management teams or what have you. But they then, in some cases, ran around for quite a while, trying, spending money and trying to find a project, trying to find a good project. And they didn't, whereas we first started with, well, we can come to the market with a project in hand, and not just any project. We come to the market with the highest quality credits, that are available on the market in a friendly jurisdiction, i.e. Canada, and with tremendous what we call community benefits or social benefits for Indigenous groups, right? If that project is anywhere near successful, it will be the largest private wealth transfer to an Indigenous group in Canadian history.
Wow.
And so that's a pretty massive and very much a motivating factor.
Yeah.
On top of that, so there's all that, and then on top of that, the scale of that project is enormous, right? We're talking about anywhere from generating 16 million credits total as a baseline before we even do any improved forest management. Now there are requirements that you have to have some of that in a buffer account. So say you have 10 to 12 million of saleable credits. That's a lot of volume a year. And you look in the industry news, and you'll see big fanfare about projects that will generate a few 100,000 credits a year at considerable cost. So the project economics are incredibly attractive, and which is great because it means obviously it's more likely to get done. So that's a big differentiating factor for us. Yeah. We have this tremendous partnership that gives us access to a top tier quality of credits at massive scale, with a pipeline of similar projects behind it of roughly 10 million hectares behind a 4.2 million hectare project. Comparable sort of project profiles, leading technology, all of that to provide, a complementary commitment to total transparency and accountability in bringing those elements to the carbon space so that our clients can trust what they're buying.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that accountability and transparency is so important?
Well, because when you look at the issues in the latest Guardian article, sort of an expose, and the critiques of the carbon sort of offsetting space, particularly within the forest and nature-based solution space, the problem is a lot of these projects aren't living up to their claims. So they come out, they use faulty formulas or faulty data, or they make crazy assumptions, or they analogize or extrapolate from project areas or from areas that are supposedly close by or representative of what you would expect this project to look like. But in actuality, they're totally different. There are a lot of different factors, but they get away with a lot of these things, even though there are registries like Barra BCS and, Gold Standard and others that are trying to impose these standards but it's hard. There are a lot of ways to cheat or make errors. Let's put it that way. Not cheat, right? And oftentimes the incentives are there to do so, whether it's cheating or just making erroneous assumptions and calculations. And so as a result, a lot of these projects don't end up sequestering the carbon that they were supposed to sequester, or that they claimed they would sequester. And as a result, it casts a lot of doubt on the whole industry.
Yeah.
Now, truthfully, everybody, since those articles came out, people come to groups like us and they say, oh, well, that whole industry, it does, it's really getting panned. That's a problem. And we say, well, actually, we think it's good for us.
Yeah.
Because it only proves what we've been saying since the beginning. We have purpose-built both Carbon Ethic and EthicStream to address those very issues.
In your experience, what would you say the biggest misconception about Carbon Ethic, carbon credits, what would you say the biggest misconception you've seen is?
Well, it's a great question, if only because it gives me a chance to attack a concept that I really, that I think is overrated, let's put it that way.
Okay.
You look at the Guardian article and you look at a lot of, even project crediting, project qualification experts, there's this concept called additionality. And what that essentially means, to put it in very basic terms, is the project adding anything to sort of address the carbon problem, right? The amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So what does that mean? So if you have a protected national park, right? Then they might say, well, and you say, oh, well, we're going to take a project area that's within a national park. Mm-hmm. We're going to protect these trees so they don't get logged and they don't get, they don't get cleared for mining or whatever, or development. And that these trees are going to take carbon out of the air, right? They're going to X amount of carbon a year. Well, you would say, well, yeah, the concept of additionality would say, well, that doesn't add anything because that was already a protected forest. You could log it if you wanted to. You could clear it for development if you wanted to. It's already protected. Now, fine, that's true in that case, but there is a bit more complexity to it because if you take, let's say, the Canadian forests, right, where Carbon Ethics project is, the forests in Canada in total, its forests have been a net emitter of carbon for over 20 years. So that's kind of like how could that be, right? Yeah. Well, we all might learn in grade school, forests are made up of trees. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. Yeah. How is it possible that they're emitting more carbon than they are taking in? Well, the answer is because they're not healthy, and they're not well managed. So improved forest management means that we can enhance the sort of lungs of those trees, if you will, like the respiration of those trees, so that they breathe in more carbon and they emit more oxygen as opposed to carbon. And why do they emit carbon? Because they're dying. So what is a tree but a carbon stick, essentially, right? So as it dies, it starts to release that carbon. And so you have this issue. Right. So that's why, going back to, you asked me what is the biggest, misconception in my view. It's not that additionality doesn't matter. It obviously does, but it's really overweighted in my view. Or at least it's not viewed with enough nuance, if you will, right? Because people are saying, oh, it's already protected. Yeah. Leave the trees alone and they'll be fine. And they'll just sequester carbon. It's just not true.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I hadn't necessarily considered that. So I think that may have been a misconception that I held as well. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of talk through that. That was really helpful. So Joshua, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with about, EthicStream, carbon ethic, the importance of, carbon credits at life?
Well, I mean, I think we fundamentally believe, both at EthicStream and carbon ethic, that carbon offsetting is a fundamental part of the solution. Mm-hmm. That we don't have to go backwards in society and how we all live our lives, right? To address the issue. Mm-hmm. That through combinations of the efficiency gains that we're gaining through technologies, maybe I'm just an optimist, but through the improvement of the offsetting industry, we do recognize these issues, but we want to be part of improving it. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, right? You should just say, okay, these are issues. Yes. Yeah. Does it mean, as they say, perfection is the enemy of progress, right? So you can't just say, oh, it's not perfect, not worth doing, right? We all really have to try to work harder to address the issue and bring solutions so that we can meet this challenge that we're all facing. It's coming head on in us. So that's what I would say as far as my sort of call to action here. I would say reach out to us if you're a company looking to sort of get some education or get some assistance with this problem, or even just open source credits. If you're an investor, be on the lookout. We'll have a bunch of exciting news coming out that'll make this opportunity available to investors, which is, and I mean everyday investors. Which is really exciting because it's not often in your life that you get to participate in a new commodity, that you get to invest in a new commodity. Those don't come around very often. That's really what this is. And it's here for the long haul. So, we hope people will come and join us and support us and drive some real change.
Those are great call to actions, Joshua. So this has been a great conversation about carbon sourcing. I really appreciate all of the education that you gave me. You certainly expanded my knowledge and my brain as well. So I appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.